You think the lives of famous black pastors are all blessings? Think again. Behind the pulpits, many of these pastors have suffered heartbreaking deaths. Many were even murdered. Today, we uncover the 15 most tragic ways black pastors have died. Let's get into it. 15. Martin Luther King Jr. Some names sit proudly in history books, never to be erased or forgotten. One of such names is Martin Luther King Jr. Of course, you know him for his civil rights movements, but only a few knew him as a Baptist pastor who loved the faith.
Many of the Israelites found themselves in bondage in Babylon.
With a voice that shook congregations, he preached powerful sermons from the pulpit.
I need not pause to say how very delighted I am to be here this morning, to have the opportunity of standing in this very great and significant pulpit.
I Have a Dream still sends chills down the spines of many, more than half a century after it was delivered. But behind the cameras, Martin was a preacher under constant threat. He believed so deeply in nonviolence that even when he faced arrests and death threats, he kept preaching. But on April 4th, 1968, in Memphis, while standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel, violence finally found him. Martin was shot, and America erupted into mass riots.
When Martin Luther King had been shot, the city just boom, just like that. People started running the street.
People wept on the streets in disbelief and shock, and the whole country felt shaken. The man who fired that shot was James Earl Ray, an escaped convict who ran from the country after killing Martin. He was eventually captured at Heathrow Airport in London and brought back to the US, where he pleaded guilty to the murder. Even with his conviction, there were still many conspiracy theories and questions about who else might have been involved in Martin's murder, and many are still asking those questions today. 14. Reverend Clementa C. Pinckney. Clementa Pinckney was a South Carolina state senator by day and the pastor of Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston by heart. This church was one of the oldest black churches in the United States, and the people there loved and respected Pinckney so much. He was soft-spoken but powerful, and he always listened before he spoke.
Whatever comes, that's what slaves did. But, we're not slaves. We're Americans, so we have responsibility to look.
Unfortunately, some people are only attracted to a shining light so they can dim it. On the evening of June 17, 2015, Pinckney was doing what he loved, conducting a small Bible study in the church basement, when a young white man named Dylan Roof walked in. This white supremacist sat for almost an hour before opening fire in the church. Just like that, 9 lives were stolen in one of the most horrifying acts of racial violence in modern America. Reverend Pinckney was only 41 years old when he was murdered. Roof fled the scene but was caught less than 24 hours later in North Carolina.
9 people are dead, and the person responsible is nowhere to be found. Police believe he is armed and dangerous. Still, all efforts being focused on finding that.
The arrest was broadcast nationwide, but the massacre still tore open old wounds about race and hate crimes. It also made many question the safety of sacred spaces. His funeral was held at the TD Arena in Charleston, and it drew thousands, including President Barack Obama. The service was a celebration of a man who spent his life standing in the breach for others, but also a reminder of the cost of hatred. 13. Pastor Paul Jones. Pastor Paul Jones had one of those smooth voices that sounded heavenly. People who heard him sing said he could melt the hardest of hearts. His song, "I Won't Complain," even became an anthem in churches across America. He wasn't a celebrity in the Hollywood sense, but in gospel circles, Paul Jones was a star. He was a humble, soft-spoken man who was deeply committed to his congregation. Even in his early 30s, he already had the aura of a seasoned preacher and singer. But while everyone looked forward to his bright future, a tragedy no one could have predicted loomed. On November 19, 1990, when he was just 30 years old, Pastor Paul Jones was lured to his own home by someone he trusted. Inside, he was shot brutally. When he didn't show up for service that evening, members of his church grew worried. They went to his house to visit, but found the unimaginable.
Did find a person that was deceased inside. Unfortunately,
The man accused of killing him was a friend who had reportedly been living with him. His family was plunged into deep grief. Radio stations played "I Won't Complain" many times in tribute, and many still stream the soulful gospel songs of the brilliant young pastor. If you appreciate this kind of deep dive content, take a second to like the video and subscribe. Over 99% of viewers watch without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it helps us a ton. Thank you. Now, back to the video. 12th, Reverend Clarence LaVaughn Franklin. Reverend Clarence LaVaughn Franklin, known to millions simply as C.L. Franklin, had a deep, booming voice, and his preaching was as magnetic as his voice. His congregation felt him more than they heard him. He was quite popular as a pastor, a civil rights activist, and as the proud father of Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul herself. In Detroit, his New Bethel Baptist Church was the center for gospel music, but it was also the center of the freedom movement. It seemed that everybody, from gospel legends to civil rights leaders, passed through those doors. And these gospel legends and civil rights leaders described C.L. Franklin as charismatic, funny, and larger than life. He was the kind of pastor who could make the gospel sound like poetry. He recorded dozens of sermons that sold like mainstream records. But on June 10, 1979, burglars broke into C.L. Franklin's Detroit home in the middle of the night. Franklin was shot twice in the chest at point-blank range, and he was already 64. In a shocking miracle, he survived the attack, but he never woke up. For 5 long years, his daughters, including Aretha, and the rest of his family cared for him at home, always hoping he might open his eyes again. However, on July 27, 1984, Reverend C.L. Franklin died without ever regaining consciousness.
He was a great biblical historian.
He was an artist. When he would give a sermon, you could see the sermon. You could see the people walking.
He was the one preacher that preachers went to hear preach.
His funeral was well attended. It was a farewell to a man whose voice had shaped the city. 11. Bishop Barnett K. Thorogood. It was a bright Sunday morning at New Jerusalem Church of God in Christ in Virginia Beach. Bishop Barnett K. Thorogood stood behind his pulpit with over 2,000 people leaning in to hear his words. That day, his sermon was called, "I Am Here to Do Battle." Suddenly he declared, "You shall live and not die." And the congregation erupted in a cheer. But the most ironic thing happened after that. The bishop sat down quietly, closed his eyes, and died. The same man who had just screamed a declaration about staying alive took his last breath.
The 62-year-old minister died in his pulpit this past Sunday, delivering what would become his final sermon.
He opened his pulpit to superstars like Pharrell Williams, Missy Elliott, and Timbaland, but he also opened his hands to the poor, the hungry, and the broken.
He invested in the lives of the homeless.
He was the kind of pastor who remembered names and showed up beside hospital beds in the middle of the night. That's why he was loved. He was 62 when he died on February 5, 2012. According to the doctor's reports, after he was rushed to the hospital, his death was caused by a sudden heart attack after a long battle with cardiovascular disease.
His final wish was to be here with the saints. He said, "If I go, son, I want to go on the battlefield. I want to be in my pulpit preaching the gospel." And ultimately, we know he's happy because the Lord honored his request.
For his funeral, thousands filed into the Virginia Beach Convention Center and his own church to celebrate him. Even now, years later, his final declaration, "You shall live and not die," remains on the lips of his congregation. 10. Desmond Tutu.
You want a leader who is also a servant.
Desmond Tutu was an Anglican archbishop, but more than that, he was a major thorn in the flesh of apartheid.
Let's not kid ourselves.
In a situation of injustice and oppression, there can be no neutrality. You have to take sides.
He chaired South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission as a pastor. Tutu earned the Nobel Peace Prize after he joined marches even on days when tear gas was used and shots were fired at protesters. Tutu died on December 26, 2021, at the age of 90. He died from complications related to prostate cancer, which is a long and slow illness he'd been managing for years.
Tutu, who earned a Nobel Peace Prize for his nonviolent opposition to white minority rule, died last Sunday.
His passing felt like the end of a moral era. South Africans poured into the streets to leave flowers for Tutu, and the bells at Cape Town's St. George's Cathedral rang 90 times, once for every year of his life. Leaders from across the world, from presidents to popes, sent tributes calling him a moral compass. His funeral was filled with hymns and stories that made people both weep and laugh. Even in death, Desmond Tutu preached one last sermon on greatness. He preached to the world that greatness has nothing to do with wealth or spectacle and everything to do with integrity. 9. Bishop Eddie Long. In the suburbs of Atlanta, Eddie Long built an empire. He took New Birth Missionary Baptist Church from a small congregation to a megachurch with a whopping 25,000 members. Bishop Eddie Long was a flashy pastor with expensive suits and flashy cars. Even his stage performances sometimes felt more like concerts than a Sunday service. But a lot was happening behind the spotlight. In 2010, 4 young men from his congregation filed lawsuits accusing him of using his position to coerce them into relationships.
And I cannot forget the way that he made me cry many nights when I drove in his cars on the way home, not able to take enough showers to wipe the smell of him off of my body.
The cases settled out of court without a trial, and Bishop Long denied wrongdoing. But the allegations caused so much ruckus that many left his church. In fact, his ministry never fully escaped the effects of those accusations.
So why did you settle the case? The old gambler song, got know when to hold it, know when to fold it, know when to walk away. By then, after such attack of media, the stress of all of that and all of this, you got to look at what's happening to you.
By 2016, people began noticing his dramatic weight loss, and on January 15, 2017, New Birth Missionary Baptist Church announced that Bishop Long had died at just 63 years old from an aggressive form of cancer. The news caused a lot of shock. To supporters, it felt like losing a spiritual father. His funeral was held at the New Birth on January 25, 2017, with more than 6,000 people in attendance. The service lasted almost 6 hours as the congregation celebrated the life of the man they had all grown to love. 8. Andraé Crouch. Andraé Crouch took gospel music out of the overused traditional church sound in those days and gave it a vibrant, new sound. He brought in drums, bass, and keyboards when many thought such instruments didn't belong in gospel songs. Suddenly, his songs even became bridges between the old and the new. For example, his song, My Tribute, To God Be the Glory, became an anthem used globally to express gratitude.
How can I say thanks for all the things that you've done for me?
But Crouch wasn't just a gospel pioneer. He was a composer and an arranger for pop culture too. He arranged the choir parts for Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror. His work also appeared in movies like The Lion King, The Color Purple, and The Preacher's Wife. If you've watched or listened to anything soulful in the past few decades, there is a huge chance you've enjoyed Andraé Crouch's influence and didn't realize it. Crouch was such a humble and open soul. Despite his fame, he had a boyish smile and an easy laugh, and he still made time for choir rehearsals and for mentoring young musicians. But his health was fragile. Over the years, he battled diabetes, cancer, and other complications. On January 8, 2015, in Los Angeles, Andraé Crouch died of heart failure at the age of 72.
The music world has lost a legend. Gospel singer and songwriter Andraé Crouch died Thursday after being admitted to the hospital following a heart attack last weekend. Over the course of his career, Crouch worked with stars like Michael Jackson, Madonna, and Barbara Mandrell.
For many, his passing felt like the end of an era. His funeral was held at West Angeles Church of God in Christ in Los Angeles, and they sang his songs back to him during the 2-day celebration of his life and legacy.
The blood that Jesus
At his passing, Andraé Crouch was estimated to be worth around $3 million, but his true wealth was the songs he left behind and the doors he opened for others. 7. Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth. There are people in this world who walk bravely into danger because they know someone has to do it, and they do it without flinching. One of such people was Fred Shuttlesworth. In Birmingham, Alabama, when segregation was at its ugliest, he was one of the only pastors preaching about justice and risking everything for it.
War against injustice, war against any system that sets up a thing where a man cannot become.
Shuttlesworth organized boycotts, challenged segregation in the courts, and led children into the streets when adults were too scared. His church, Bethel Baptist, was bombed more than once, too. He was beaten by a mob in 1957, arrested dozens of times, and survived an attempt on his life when a group tried to stab him on the courthouse steps. But every time, he came back.
Reverend Shuttlesworth also took the stage.
Freedom belongs to anybody, it belongs to everybody. And until everybody has freedom, nobody is really free.
It was a powerful speech, but even some in his own family had never heard it until the past few days when it aired on C-SPAN.
Fred Shuttlesworth died on October 5, 2011 in Birmingham at the age of 89 from natural causes. But the shock of losing him was still devastating.
Well, Cherie, we are learning that his life will be celebrated in Birmingham as well as here in Cincinnati. As you mentioned, Reverend Shuttlesworth, 89 years old when he passed away yesterday morning after a long illness.
Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth's daughter said they had grown up watching their father fight again and again, even after their home was bombed, and they called his passing the closing of a mighty chapter. At his death, the streets of Birmingham were filled with mourners, black and white, old and young, who came to say goodbye to the man who had once been the city's most hated preacher. Even in death, Fred Shuttlesworth's story still pushes people to be braver than they think they can be. 6. Thomas Andrew Dorsey. If you have ever listened to Precious Lord, Take My Hand, you have listened to Thomas A. Dorsey, the man many call the father of gospel music.
This is where Thomas Andrew Dorsey, known as the father of gospel music, led the choir for 50 years.
Before gospel, he played blues, and he carried that sound and rhythm into sacred spaces. By doing so, Dorsey changed what church music could be.
Shirley Caesar. Anybody that was anybody that's on the gospel circuit stopped at Pilgrim, because they all appreciated the music of Thomas Dorsey.
He was admired for his compositions and his courage. He lost his wife and infant child in 1932 and poured that grief into Precious Lord. That kind of brokenness made his songs more than melodies. They became a source of comfort for those feeling similar pain. Thomas Dorsey lived to be 93. He died of natural causes on January 23, 1993 in Chicago after a long life of struggle. Still, even when it was expected, his death hit gospel communities hard. Tributes poured in from all over the world, from churches, radio stations, historians, artists, and so many more. Dorsey's life shows that a song can carry both grief and hope, and that music born from pain can become a balm to many. 5. Edward Hawkins. Some songs grab your heart, take you to somewhere brighter, and remind you why you're alive. That's what Edward Hawkins' Oh Happy Day did. In 1968, he recorded a gospel song that crossed over into the pop charts all around the world. Suddenly, it was on the radios in Europe, Africa, and America. Edward went on to write, sing, and produce even more gospel music that moved people's spirits. But behind the music, there was a fight going on. Edward Hawkins was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, one of the deadliest forms of the disease. But in his last months, he still found time to encourage others. On January 15, 2018, his fight ended. He died at 74 years old in Pleasanton, California.
Remembering gospel star and Oakland native Edwin Hawkins. He died at his home in Pleasanton early this morning after a battle with cancer.
The reaction to his death was heartfelt. His funeral was held in Oakland, and there were preachers, artists, and community leaders in attendance.
It's a full house here at Harbor Light Church for a man who many feel is the father of contemporary urban gospel.
His family spoke about his humor, his discipline, and the joy he brought into their lives. Edward Hawkins may be gone, but every time that gospel chorus rises, "Oh, happy day when Jesus washed my sins away," he will be remembered. Fourth, Reverend James Cleveland. James Edward Cleveland was such an amazing pastor and preacher. He was a good singer too, and he sang popular gospel songs like "Help Me to Hold Out" and "Peace Be Still, Lord."
I believe we ought to say it one more time, Joe.
But Reverend James Cleveland battled with health challenges like obesity and cardiovascular strain. But these did not stop him from leading, composing, arranging, and preaching. Unfortunately, on February 9th, 1991, at age 59, he died in Culver City, California, from congestive heart failure. He even fell into a coma before passing. When news broke, the gospel world felt the loss. His label, colleagues, and disciples all over the world grieved a man whose music had shaped their faith. His funeral was epic. Over 8,000 people packed the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles to say goodbye.
Every church now has a youth department, and usually the youth choir or the youth singing aggregations in the church are the largest.
Many who loved him said his influence might never dim. Even today, his music lives in sanctuaries and homes, long after that day in 1991 when the lights dimmed on his pulpit. Third, Bishop Leontine T. C. Kelly. You know that moment when someone breaks a ceiling no one even knew hadn't been broken? Leontine Kelly broke one of such ceilings. Born March 5, 1920, she grew up in a home of preachers and activists.
I know that possibly if I'd been born in another part of the world, another person, I would probably have been nurtured in a different way.
She started out as a school teacher, but when her husband passed, she stepped in and followed a calling she never expected to receive. In 1984, the Western jurisdiction of the United Methodist Church elected Leontine Kelly bishop, making her the first African-American woman ever elected to that office in a major U.S. Christian denomination, and only the second woman bishop in the UMC overall. She was 64 then. She served the San Francisco area until her retirement, shepherding more than 100,000 Methodists in California and Nevada. United Methodist News Service. People loved her because she spoke for two worlds at once, the sacred and the common.
Miracle is what is ordinary to God and extraordinary to human beings.
She died on June 28, 2012 in Oakland, California at the age of 92 after a period of declining health. In obituaries and tributes that poured in after her death, people called her a spiritual mother and a pioneer, someone who made it possible for others to walk paths she first carved. 2. Pastor Norman Hutchins. If you have listened to tracks like God's Got a Blessing and Battlefield, you have listened to Pastor Norman Hutchins.
Makes no difference what you're going through.
But away from his music, many know him for his grit and his refusal to let pain silence him.
And I love songs, I love music, but when your back is against a wall and you have to make some tough choices and decisions, you're going to need more than a song.
He poured fire into every service, and when he could no longer walk, he rolled into the pulpit with a wheelchair. Pastor Norman Hutchins wrestled with diabetes for years, and it was so bad that eventually both of his legs were amputated. Still, he never stepped away from the ministry. On August 14th, 2025, after a long fight, Norman Hutchins died from complications of diabetes at the age of 76. While alive, he had tried to make his worship songs heal all emotional wounds. He had mentored younger singers and showed up for those who needed him, even on his harder days. His funeral was a large homegoing, worthy of his resilience. Choirs sang his songs, and pastors gave testimonies about how Norman Hutchins had carried them when they were weak. Norman Hutchins has shown us what faith should look like when the body is weak. Faith doesn't require perfect health and doesn't demand ease, and Pastor Norman Hutchins preached that truth until his last breath.
Makes no difference what you're going through.
1. Bishop G.E. Gilbert Patterson. Bishop G.E. Patterson led one of the most popular Pentecostal congregations in America with a tough stage presence. He loved gospel music, mentored younger preachers, and believed that the gospel should reach everyone on the globe. But Bishop Patterson died in 2007 when he was only 67, and he died from prostate cancer. To his community, his loss felt like the dimming of a beacon in the Pentecostal world. They missed him so much that the attendance at his funeral was enormous. It was obvious Patterson had touched the hearts of so many people. Even broadcast networks aired the funeral. His family wept. His people spoke of how his sermons had changed them, how he made them feel seen. Bishop G.E. Patterson's voice may have gone silent, but his message continues to echo in many hearts. These stories remind us that even the most anointed aren't shielded from life's darkest turns. Behind the sermons are real people facing real battles. Their endings may be tragic, but their impact, faith, and legacies still echo through their churches, communities, and generations. Which of these stories shook you the most? Stay tuned, because what if I told you that there is another set of Black pastors who are alive, but doing unimaginable things? See our video on Exposed: Rich Black Pastors Who Lied About God for Power.